छाया आसमान देखो झूमता गगन है छाया आसमान देखो झूमता गगन
Hi everybody, welcome back for another lesson. Today we're going to be taking a look at Zentangles. Now, Zentangles themselves are just a very simple, non-realistic, non-representational type of artwork. They're usually small, like this piece here. They can be much larger though, and that's totally up to you. If you decide to follow along, you can go ahead and prepare the paper small like this, or you can just do it on a regular sheet. It's your choice. Zentangles are designed to be artwork that you can create to help you relax, and it relies upon using patterns, different shapes and lines together in order to create your work. So what I'd like to do is show you how to prepare the paper if you would like to get it small like this. You'll need to start off with a small sheet of paper. I'm sorry, a regular sheet of paper. And then just fold it in half. And then fold it in half again. And this is going to give you 4 rectangles. Then you just simply take a pair of scissors and cut along the creases. Now, what this will do for you too is gives you 4 pieces of paper. So if you want to do 4 different Zentangles, you can. Like I said, this step is optional. You don't have to do it if you don't want. You can just use a regular size sheet of paper. Now, I'm going to take my one sheet. I'm going to set these others aside. And let's look back at the example that I've already prepared. Let's look a little bit closer at it now. So here you can see that I've got it broken into 4 different sets of patterns. The way this is done is by starting off and separating your piece of paper into 4 sections. The easiest way to think of that is to simply draw a letter Z that touches each side. Left side to top, top to bottom, bottom to right. And so now it looks like a letter Z. Now I've got 4 parts as well. Now you can choose to follow along with me and do the same patterns, or you can come up with your own patterns, but you want each section to be something different. Now here's my challenge for you on this. Get an ink pen or a marker. Instead of drawing out the designs first, we're going to jump straight into drawing the designs with something permanent like this pen. Now the first design that I'm going to do is this design here. This one is a fish scale design. And what I'm going to do is simply do a curved line that starts and stops on this pencil line here. And then I'm going to draw another one just like it. And so on, all the way to the edge of the page. When I do the next row, I want to start at the top of the curve and end at the top of the curve of the next scale. Just like that. And then I would continue that pattern on. And the next row, same way. And you continue this pattern this same way until this entire part of your Zentangle is filled up. Just like that. Now this next section, I'm going to have it look like this one here. To do this one, I need to draw lines that are going to give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. So here's one right there along that Z line. So there's one part there. 2, 3, 4, and 5 is here. Notice that they're a little bit wider as they go out toward the edge of the page. This first row, I'm going to fill it up with circles. This next row, I'm going to do curved lines. Back to circles again. So notice I'm creating a pattern here. This one is an alternating pattern, or an A-B pattern, where we're going from circle to curved line to circle. What's going to be the next one, do you think? Did you say curved line? Good. And the last one will be circles again. Notice that I'm making the circles bigger at the end, and as it goes up toward the top, they get smaller. Now this one. For this one, I'm going to create a checkerboard pattern first. I'm actually going to turn it a bit like this, so it's a bit easier for me. And I'm going to do several parallel lines. And these lines are going to be up and down like this. Parallel lines, that means that these are all running the same path. Next, I'm going to go across them with some horizontal lines. Now, notice that this gives me a checkerboard. I've got a bunch of squares inside of here. Now, what I want to do is do more parallel lines, but I'm only going to fill up half of each of these squares. And I'm going to fill it up on the same side over on the left. So that one's done. And the next. And so on. And I continue this for all of these squares. And there we go. And the last pattern is again going to be kind of like a checkerboard, but notice that this time these horizontal and vertical lines, instead of being perfectly straight, they're a bit wobbly. And this time inside of these, I'm going to create smaller shapes that follow the shape that I've created here, this wobbly, kind of melted looking rectangle. And then inside of each one of those, a smaller shape, just like it. Okay, so at this point, either your Zentangle is complete, or you can add some shading like I did on this one. So I'm going to go ahead and show you shading, or what we call value, instead. I'm going to go ahead and move this one off to the side. The first thing I want to decide on is this pattern which direction I want the light to come from. And so I'm going to imagine that light is coming from the right, which means the right side of these scales are going to be light and the left side is going to be dark. So you want to have a pencil that's got a good lead on it, but it doesn't need to be super sharp. You actually want it to be a little bit dull. And now I'm just going in and adding some shading to each one of these. Now if you've got a Q-tip or something like that, you can actually take that Q-tip and smudge your pencil marks, and that'll make it look a little bit more realistic as well. And now that pattern's complete. Looking at the next pattern, again, I'm going to imagine where the light's coming from first, and I think I'll keep that consistent here. The light coming from the right, which means things on the left will be dark. And I add a little bit of shading to each one of those circles. Now, with the curved lines here, I want to imagine that this is kind of like a trough where the paper is actually going down. And so I'm going to add shadows to both sides of that part of the pattern, and it's going to be darker at the edge and lighter in the middle. Now I'll just repeat this for the rest of it. And now this last bit here. Okay, now over on this one, I'm actually not going to do any shading on these lines here. I am going to imagine that there's a little bit of shading over on the blank side of the square. Now again, remember, this is optional. You don't have to do the shading, and you don't even have to shade everything in this if you don't want. If you wanted to leave this pattern like it was, that's perfectly fine. Now you may be wondering too, do you have to have it be black and white like this, or could you add color? Sure you can. Of course you can. If you have things at home that you want to color with this, that is perfectly fine. That's one of the nice things about this sort of stuff. There's not really any rules to it. You can just have some fun and relax while you make this art. This last pattern here, again, I'm going to imagine lights coming from the right, and I want to imagine that each piece of this is sticking above the other. And so I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow to each one of these as if it were sticking up from the page. Okay, the last thing that I want to do to this one to finish it out is I want to imagine that each section is actually at different heights on the page. And so I'm going to have this part be above this part and this part. And so I'm going to go in and add a shadow along the left side of this pattern, or the right side of this one, depending upon your point of view. And same thing over here. And by adding that shadow, it's making it seem as if this one is above these two. And I'm going to imagine the same thing over here. I want to imagine that this one is above this one. And there we go. So that finishes out our Zentangles today. I hope you enjoyed making a Zentangle with me. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you give it a like so that way I know how many of you enjoyed it. Again, this is Mr. Stanley, and we will see you again soon.